What's up, guys? Rick from DFS On Demand here with the first PGA preview of the season. This is the moment we've all been waiting for if you're a PGA DFS nut like myself. It is the Sentry Tournament of Champions. So this has gone by a couple of names in the last few years. It was the Hyundai Tournament of Champions, if you remember that. It was the SBS Tournament of Champions. Now it's the Sentry Tournament of Champions, but not much else has changed. We're going to be playing Kapalua again this week. Remember, it's a par 73. It's got the extra par 5. It is the easiest course on the PGA Tour. You're going to have to make a lot of birdies here. And there's going to be a lot of, these fairways that run forever. You're probably going to see some 400-yard drives, stuff like that. It should be pretty fun, beautiful setting on Maui. So very much looking forward to this. To qualify for this field, 34 players in the field. You must have won last year. So Tournament of Champions, that's exactly what it is. So we've got 34 champs from last year teeing off and playing this week. As we get into this, I'm going to show you a lot of the tools that I've built myself. I love them. They're very much fluid, though. If you have any feedback, I want you to tell me. And they're available on dfsondemand.com. And we're going to start with the cheat sheet. The first cheat sheet of the year. And let's just look through this and see what we've got going on. And there's a lot to digest on these tools. So the cheat sheet, I think, is really handy. I've got all 34 players loaded in here, sorted by salary. Now, this week, since it's been, some of these guys haven't played in a couple of months. Some haven't played since the Tournament of Champions. We don't have a lot of recent history or recent form to go off of. These blue columns are the most recent PGA Tour events. So the furthest left is the most recent. So that's the RSM Classic, the OHL, what would that be? The Shriners, et cetera, Sanderson Farms, back to the Safeway. Okay, so those are the last 8 PGA Tour events. I've got some key metrics or key stats for the PGA Tour. Those are going to be changing each week. More on those later. And then I've got tournament history here, finishing position for the last 4 years. Oh, by the way, this is finishing position over here, right? So Ricky Fowler, that's a second place at the OHL. And then these are the last 4 years of the Tournament of Champions. So you can see Jordan Spieth, a first, a second, and a third the last 3 times he's played it. Pretty good. Then on the right-hand side, we've got the past champions, just so you have a list here. And then in the bottom right, these are only players in the field. So I've got every player in the field here who's played this event and how many DraftKings points they're averaging. And then I also threw in how many starts they have, just because, a lot of these guys have only played it once or twice. So I don't want you to get too carried away there. I want you to know how big your sample size is. So let's start here on the cheat sheet, and let's talk through this a little bit. Justin Thomas, your player of the year, is your highest salary player. Like, there's really no surprises in salary here. Jordan Spieth, what you're going to find at these events, and we're going to talk about this more in a second, the Tournament of Champions tends to be a little bit of a putting contest, okay? The best putters win here. Jordan Spieth certainly fits that category, and he's had great success, and no surprise that he has. You can't really go wrong with any of these players, but I do want to point out a few extra things here. So Brooks Koepka down here at 9,400. He's a guy that's going to pop up as we go through this. He's going to pop up often. If you go to the right-hand side here, he's only played it once, which was 2016 with a third-place finish. He scored 116 DraftKings points. That's excellent. Save Brooks Koepka front of mind as we start going through a lot of these tour metrics, because he's going to continue to pop up constantly. Outside of that, this is something fun we always used to do on the other videos, on the other spreadsheet that I have, and we'd sort this by odds, and we would look through and we'd say, okay, whose salary doesn't match their odds? And Patrick Cantlay is a guy that pops off, right? So he's 20-1 to win, same price as Mark Leishman, but he's $400 cheaper. Kevin Kisner, another guy who I think is a pretty good value, has had success here in the past. He had a top 10 in 2016. I'll be talking about him more in some other videos for my one and done and other things, but coming off a 4th place finish in the last time that he teed it up. Cam Smith is the other guy that jumps out here, and he's $7,600. He's 30-1 to win this, which is the same odds as Berger, Perez, Harman, who are all more expensive. Cam Smith won the last time he teed it up. He won the Australian PGA Championship. I don't have the date handy. It was probably a couple weeks ago. He won that event. So the last time he teed it up, he was a winner. So pretty good to see that. And then he's only $7,600. He is going to make a lot of my DFS lineups. That value in this type of event is crucial. Kyle Stanley also a little bit underpriced, it looks like, okay? Let's go to the course history here and see if we can find some other types of values here. So this is the course history tool, and I've got it sorted by just players in this field. If I were to uncheck that, I could get everyone who's ever played the Tournament of Champions, but I don't really need that. I just want everyone who's in the field this year. And I've got the different Tournament of Champions names in here, and we can just look through this. Again, this is average DraftKings points here. So no surprise that Jordan Spieth pops off. Brooks Koepka we talked about. Hideki's there. Let's look at Russ Henley. So if you click any one of these, you'll get how many times they've played this, and you'll get their record here. So here's Russ Henley, 3rd place in a 27th. The 3rd place was in 2015. He's going to pop up on some stats as we go through this. Dustin Johnson, I mean, he wins a lot, so he's played it a lot. Won it in 2013. If we sort more recently, he's gone 6th and 10th the last 2 years. So these are all very handy little metrics. But I think what the big thing I want to get to is something that I'm really looking to expand on for this year. I just threw this together very quickly, so bear with me on this. I just did this 5 minutes ago. I'm going to expand this for the rest of the year. What I'm looking to do is, now that I have all the stats for all the players all the time, I'm able to run a regression model and find which stats correlate to DraftKings success. Without getting too deep into that, basically I say, okay, here's how many DraftKings points they scored in any event. What other stats, what were the players' stats coming into that week or for that year that might correlate? Like maybe Kapalua is for good putters, which is something we're going to see here in a second. But I can do this for every course. So as the season goes along, even if tournaments have changed courses or names or whatever, if I have the course stats, I can run this regression and find the most important stats. So in the past, and sorry to be a little long-winded here, but it's a new season and I want to talk about all this. In the past, for key stats, a lot of us would just guess at key stats, right? So I would say, okay, driving distance, that's probably a pretty good one. It's a long course. Or, you know, these greens are tough to hit. Let's do strokes gained approach. Like, we'd kind of guess a little bit. We don't have to guess anymore because I can run this regression and tell you exactly what stats correlated. Now, if you want to believe that in small sample sizes or whatever, that's fine, but I'm going to get a number. So these 5 stats you're looking at correlated the best to success at Kapalua, and I'm defining success as DraftKings points. Birdie average was number 1, birdie or better number 2. No surprise there, they're like the same stat essentially. Par 4 birdie or better, again, kind of a very similar stat. Par 5 birdie or better, also in there. So you can see you have to make a lot of birdies here. It's not going to be like this every single week. And then putts made over 10 feet. That's the one that's interesting. That's the one, and we kind of knew like, oh, Kapalua, like you got to make putts. Like you have to make putts here. And the fact that that popped up made me really happy. So now I've got these stats and we can kind of look through this a little bit. So you can come through and you can sort and just look at birdie average. So again, it's a lot of the top names you would expect, right? Like the best players in the world make a lot of birdies. Like no kidding. Koepka's in here. You know, Koepka makes more birdies per round than Rahm. then Dustin Johnson, Grayson Murray, who we'll talk about, a value who makes a lot of birdies. Here's Russ Henley. Here's Cam Smith. I mean, you can see these guys are ahead of some of the bigger names like Leishman, like Stanley, like Duffner. I mean, Kisner's all the way down here. I'm going to have a lot of Kisner this week, but he doesn't make a lot of birdies. Okay? So you can go through here, but what I've done is I've created these little charts. And let me just expand this one. So up the left-hand side, I hope you can see this. Here we go. Up the left-hand side is the salary for this week, and across the bottom is how many birdies per round a player makes. So we know that this stat correlates. So again, no real surprise that Justin Thomas and Jordan Spieth are the head of the class. And for this purpose, for value and for most birdies, you really want guys essentially bottom right or below the trend line and to the right. So Matsuyama and Koepka would match that criteria. So here's Koepka again. He's going to pop up all over the place, guys. 4.2 birdies per round at $9,400 is more birdies per round than Jon Rahm for cheaper. So very easy to identify that. Here's Grayson Murray who pops up, and here are his similar priced peers, right? Like guys similarly priced. Stanley, Swafford, Hadwin, Vegas, Horschel. He blows those guys out of the water. Of course, he doesn't blow away Koepka or Matsuyama, but for the price, he does. Okay, so that's a pretty handy little tool. I'll skip birdie or better because it's like this. It's like the same exact thing. Here's par 4 birdie or better, which I thought was interesting. You know, Kapalua has the usual number of par 4s, right? It's the extra par 5 that gets it to a par 73. But par 4 scoring and par 4 birdie or better popped up a lot last year when we did key stats. And it's interesting to see who finds success here. Xander Schauffele, okay, a guy who won the Tour Championship. I think he's priced at 8,500 this week. You know, 19% birdie or better on par 4s, which is a correlating stat for this course. Duffner actually pops up here. Again, Grayson Murray in his price range does a lot better. So I thought this was pretty interesting. And then here's the really, really interesting one that I love. This is putts per round made over 10 feet. That's what this stat is. Ricky Fowler is literally off the charts. Okay, Ricky Fowler makes, I don't know if I can get him back in here. Ricky Fowler makes 7.5 putts over 10 feet per round. Brooks Koepka, who to me is not really known as a great putter. If you weren't like, if I were to say name the best putters on tour, I don't know how many guys we'd have to name before we got to Brooks Koepka. But he makes a lot of long putts or putts over 10 feet. $9,400. You know, he of course Matsuyama's down here. Like, we know he's such a crappy putter, right? It might be tough for him to win this event. Now, he's had success here in the past, but looking at the last 8 years of correlation says this stat is very important. Now, he makes a lot of birdies other ways to potentially make up for that, but in theory, this would not be a course that was set up well for Matsuyama based on this specific stat. Excuse me. Russ Henley here continues to pop up amongst his peers, right? Like, Russ Henley makes more putts over 10 feet than Justin Thomas. Now, this is a season's worth of data. You could say that's because Justin Thomas stuffs it inside 10 feet more often. Like, you can argue any of these, but I'm telling you, when I ran a regression model and correlated every stat on tour to DraftKings success, putts over 10 feet was one of the top 5 stats, okay? And then this is the chart that shows you the players that are better than their peers in those categories. So that's kind of like the deep dive into all of it. I'll bring it back out to the cheat sheet and just kind of talk through maybe a little bit of strategy and who I'm going to play. So, barring withdrawal or injury or disqualification, I suppose, everyone's going to play 4 rounds here. There's no cut. So when we have no cut events, we're looking for birdie makers in general, guys who are going to make a ton of birdies. the fact that you're going to need to do that to win here anyway just goes hand in hand. So I don't think there's any real surprises here. Again, I will be very heavy on Brooks Koepka. I think he's underpriced at $9,400 for a lot of the stats that correlate. He has had success here in the past. He will probably be one of my highest owned golfers. Ricky Fowler will probably also be one of my highest owned golfers. Nothing against Jordan Spieth and Justin Thomas. It's just when I'm making lineups, I suspect there's going to be a lot of Fowler and there's going to be a lot of Koepka. Kisner is another guy, along with Xander Schauffele, in that middle range that stick out to me. They've had good success recently. Schauffele's coming off the Tour Championship win. They had some good stats that correlated, and Kisner's had success here in the past. Further down, I'm really enjoying Cam Smith being a winner in his last event and the value with the odds. Russ Henley, I think, is probably a little bit more of a flyer than I would have liked to really indicate there. I mean, I think the stats pop up, but if you remember last year, he popped up on our stats a lot, and he also disappointed a lot. Take that for what it's worth. I will have a few flyers on Henley, but I think his stats are unfortunately mostly noise. As we get further down the list, I obviously become less and less comfortable with any of these players. Adam Hadwin has shown that he can win a golf tournament in the past, and Grayson Murray has shown that he can make a lot of birdies. So those are probably the two guys, and maybe Austin Cook. Austin Cook's a pretty good dynamic young player. Those are really the guys that I'm going to have the most exposure to down at the bottom. I'm really not interested in DA Points. I'm really not interested in Chris Stroud. Sorry guys, it's nothing against you. You can go out and have a good week this week. They're just not. I won't have a piece of them. So in each one of those tiers, those are the guys that I'm really looking at. As we go along this year, I'm going to build off those regression models, build those stats. We're no longer going to guess on key stats. We're going to know for sure. So bear with me as we get started up this year. To get those tools up and running, but there's really a lot of great tools on dfsondemand.com right now. I'm looking for your feedback, so if you have any ideas, let me know. Tweet me, it's at DFS on Demand, or leave a comment below. Talk to you guys soon. See ya.